All right, good morning, everyone. Today is November 17th, great day in my heart. And today we have a webinar for build resilience, mental strength for men, led by Mr. Richard B. Adderley. So we definitely want to thank you all for coming. This is our final in all of our webinar series. And for those of you who may have missed the other ones, just giving you a heads up, we will have a recording of all of our webinars posted onto our YouTube channel as well as our podcast links. Let me just give a brief introduction into Mr. Richard B. Adley, our presenter for today. He is a licensed clinical psychologist who specializes in the areas of public health psychology. This involves the application of psychological principles to improve the health and well-being of entire populations rather than just individuals. Public health psychology investigates the connection between psychological and behavioral factors and population health to design, implement, and evaluate programs for disease prevention and health promotion, such as gender-based violence, substance abuse, diabetes, and mental health issues in at-risk groups. Sir Richard Adley is born on the island of Cat Island in the wonderful Bahamas and a 1977 graduate of Queen's College and the immediate past president of the Bahamas Psychological Association and past chair of the School of Social Sciences at the University of the Bahamas. Richard completed his undergrad and graduate degrees in psychology and doctoral studies in public health. He also has an LLB for mental health law specialty. He is a practice psychologist for the past 43 years. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome in our speaker for today, Mr. Richard Adderley.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much, Prince, for introducing me. And it's going to be a pleasure for me to be here with you today. I think we have, what, 45 minutes? 50?
Yeah, about 40 to 45 minutes.
Okay. And so, I'm from Cat Island, so I pack a lot of stuff. So I know I've got more slides than time, but we're going to go through it and I'm going to make it work. We're going to get through this as quickly as possible, but I want to be as thorough as possible so that at the end of the day, we leave here feeling as if we got something. So today we're going to talk about this whole topic of building resilience, mental strength for men. And this is timely because we're going through quite a bit. And men don't usually talk about issues that they're experiencing. And so today we're going to address these issues. We're going to talk about some of the myths. We're going to talk about the stigma, and then we're going to come up with some, strategies for building resilience, especially with regards to mental health. So let us get going. Okay, so at the end, I'll click on my camera and everyone can get a good look, but that's me. 43 years of working in mental health. Started off back in 1982, and at that time, the Bahamas was experiencing a cocaine epidemic, and so as we say, I got my training in substance abuse training, working with cocaine addicts, persons who freebased cocaine. And over the years, it's developed into employee assistance program, but there's always been a concentration on what are the strategies for improving mental health for men. So men are no different from anyone else. Men cry, men have panic attacks, men have insecurities, men self-harm, men have eating disorders, men go to therapy, men have trauma, men have body image issues, men are abused. And even this week at the university, we're taking another look at this whole issue of gender-based violence because usually we talk about the females being victims, but there are men who are abused as well. And so we want to look at their mental health, especially in research areas here at the university. Men deserve support, men feel things, and men need love and care. So why does this matter? Well, looking at recent statistics, we know that 1 in 8 men experience some form of depression. Depression is also now the leading mental health illness in the workplace. Men are less likely to seek help than women. Women will gravitate towards getting assistance. Men are somewhat reluctant. There's a high prevalence rate of erectile dysfunction affecting Caribbean men, and this is often linked to chronic health conditions. And a number of the chronic health conditions are correlated with mental health issues, and that's why this is important. Men often suffer in silence because we just don't know where to go, who to go to, or how to share what we're experiencing. And then there are societal expectations and stigma that keep many men from speaking up. So let's talk about the common mental health challenges that you and organizations will face today. I'll give you the list and then we'll go through each one. So stress and burnout, depression, anxiety, workaholism, substance misuse, loneliness and emotional isolation, the imposter syndrome, anger and frustration management issues, relationship and family strain, and then suicidal ideation in very severe cases. Stress and burnout. Stress and burnout, this comes about after long work hours and high performance expectations. And also, there's some competition driven cultures. There's some work cultures that just thrive on competition. And so it's a very, very, very competitive work environment. People go in, day out. I've got to beat this one. I've got to do this. Then long work hours and then high performance expectations. They set sometimes, goals that seem unachievable. But many organizations are pushing, 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 pushing. And what that results in for men is irritability, fatigue, the loss of motivation. Just this morning, I got a call from a young male client who was saying that, that he felt as if he was losing it. He's lost his drive. He's tired. He's just physically exhausted. And even to the point where he doesn't want to go into work because he can't concentrate on it. And so when persons are experiencing stress and experiencing burnout, we see these signs. The problem is that us men often push through instead of acknowledging exhaustion. I don't know what it is about us men, but we don't like to say we're tired. We don't like to say I give up. And this often leads to burnout or health problems. We keep pushing ourselves till we get to the point where we just can't take it anymore and we collapse, we're sick, we're hospitalized. This is a major problem. The second is depression. Depression comes about when there's no expression. And so whenever we begin to work with people who are depressed, we notice that they've slowed down. They're not talking. They're keeping things in. It's almost as if they're carrying the weight of the world around them. And chronic work stress, loss of purpose, job insecurity, or unacknowledged emotional strain. All of these things contribute to depression. You know what it is to wake up every day to get to the point where you're just stressed out. I remember on one of my jobs, maybe about 10, 15 years ago, I got to the point where every Sunday night I got sad. Sad because it's just the thought of having to go into that organization on a Monday morning and sit through some of the issues and having to deal with people and deal with issues. And I felt lost. And there's constant concern whether or not you're going to keep your job, whether or not you're achieving the objectives of the company. And it brings about emotional strain. And what happens when people, men are depressed? They begin to withdraw. You see, they say to themselves, my wife can always tell when something's not going right with me because she says, now you're being quiet. Why are you not talking? Something is wrong. Talk to me. You see, because men have a tendency to withdraw. We also get angry. We become very cynical. There's loss of interest in work or hobbies. Some of the things that you would usually do, you get to the point where you say, I'm not interested. I remember I was working out at the gym and I couldn't get past the treadmill. I'd just go to the treadmill and I'd walk as slow as I could for an hour. And usually, I'm in there and I'm hype and I want to lift some weights and everything. But just the thought of having to go and push weights was like, oh, gee, I can't deal with this today. And then absenteeism. When men are depressed, they don't go to work sometimes. They just can't deal with it. They can't cope. And so one of the things that I talk to human resources departments about is this high rate of absenteeism. Whenever you see people are not coming to work, it's an indication that something is wrong mentally. And so there's a correlation with depression and absenteeism. Or on the flip side, when they're depressed, they overwork to distract from emotions. And so the thing is, they keep pushing, they keep pushing, keep pushing, they go to work because they don't want to have to deal with the emotional aspects. So men's depressions often looks like irritability or overengagement, not just sadness. And that's a big difference between men and women. You see sadness, you see slowing down, you see not wanting to be involved, you see taking to bed in women. But a lot of men, it's irritable. It's like you say something to them and they're ready to eat your head off. Or they work harder, harder, harder. They overengaged in whatever assignments they have. Anxiety. Anxiety is the third one. Constant performance pressure, fear of failure, unrealistic deadlines, or fear of appearing weak. All of these things contribute to anxiety. Now, I'll give you a quick little story. Um, Worrying takes place in the mind, which is a mental thing. Stress shows up in the body, which is a physical thing. Now, I want you to imagine worrying and I want you to imagine stress. If you have unresolved mental worries and you have unresolved stress, then it manifests in your body as anxiety. Anxiety takes the mental aspects from worrying and it takes the physical aspects from stress. And this is why when persons are anxious, they talk about having panic attacks. They talk about their mind racing. They talk about being unable to control their physical movements. When we think in terms of anxiety, anxiety is a fear of the unknown. And so any of us who are living in anticipation, okay, living not sure what the future holds, our levels of anxiety are going to go very high. Um, and I give you another example. A young man, I was talking about his daughter is planning on going off to school, and the fact is that he doesn't have the money. He's expecting it, but there's no sign that it's going to come in time. And so he says that it's like he's living, a nightmare. It's a nervous wreck because he's anticipating these things, but there's no guarantees. And so we tend to be anxious when we are unsure of what's going to happen in the future. And this is one of the reasons why us men are sometimes reluctant to go for medical checkups. Because the thing is that we often anticipate hearing the worst news. So we get anxious, we get nervous, we're afraid, which is quite unlike young women because young women in their 20s start off by going to doctors. They start seeing gynecologists. If they're going to think in terms of motherhood, they see a gynecologist and then during pregnancy, they see obstetricians and they're constantly in the doctor's office ensuring that their health is being taken care of. Us men do not usually jump to go for checkups. And by the time we do go for checkups, sometimes the issues that we have to deal with have significantly worsened. And this is a problem. And so anxiety is a big thing for lots of us young men. Um, and what do? We try to be perfect, but there's restlessness. We are unable to sleep. There's excessive worry about mistakes and over controlling of behaviors. These are some of the symptoms that we see for men who experience anxiety. And then substance misuse. So alcohol or drugs are used to cope with stress, to numb emotions, or maintain social acceptance at work events. Now let's spend a couple of minutes on this. It's used to cope with stress. A lot of times when I speak to men and I say, "How do you deal with your stress?" They say stuff like, "We drink. I drank." Okay, there's nothing like a nice cold one after work to deal with the stress that I've experienced. But if you're getting into the habit of every time you stress, you drink, then you're going to be develop a dependency because you're going to see a correlation between any stress and drinking, stress and marijuana, stress, God forbid, cocaine. But the fact is that there are people who use drugs in order to cope with stress. We also, as men, use drugs to numb emotions. And what do I mean by that? Take, for instance, any funeral that you go to. Um, a lot of times you're at a funeral, the women are inside, they're crying, they're grieving. The men are outside in dark shades and t-shirts and drinking beer, drinking alcohol because they do not want to deal with the grief. They do not want to be seen as weak. They do not want to express tears. They don't want to express emotions. And then thirdly, to maintain social acceptance at work events. Interestingly enough, substance abuse is a social issue. Most people who get into substance dependency will tell you that their initial use of a substance came during a social event. And so, what often happens is that we go out and we drink because everyone else is drinking, and we continue to drink because everyone else continues to drink. And then there's this thing about how many can you drink and can you hold your liquor. And so the behaviors that we see is increased drinking after work, also using stimulants to stay productive. We have mood swings, and then we see declining performance because after a while of continuous drinking, and becoming dependent on it, then we begin to see a decline in how you perform at work. And it's simple. If you go out and if you're drinking every night after work, at some point it's going to catch up with you where you're going to be unable to get to work on time the next day, or you're going to be suffering some of the effects from the substances that you used the night before. Loneliness and emotional isolation. Many men lack close emotional connections at work due to masculine norms discouraging vulnerability. Wow, this is a big thing. I did a focus group with one of my psychology classes last week, and the discussion was that with young men, and I would say the average age was about 19, 20 in the class. Do you cry if you found out that your best friend, who's a male, had died? And the overwhelming majority of the young men said, no, you do not cry. And even if you cry, you definitely don't cry in public because we don't want anyone to know that we were that close to another male. Wow. Now that's powerful, you see. And I think that continues in the workplace. Many men lack this close emotional connection. We don't want to be deemed as being close to another man simply because it makes us vulnerable. What are people going to say? What are people going to think? And so, how this manifests itself is that it's the lone wolf behavior. There's reluctance to share struggles or to avoid team support. And I'll tell you a little joke about this. I remember when I was 17, this would have been back in the late 70s. And at the time, if you went to a nightclub and you needed to dance, it was your job as a man to go to the next side of the room and ask a young lady. And so I went to this young lady and I approached her and I said, would you like to dance? And of course, she gave me one of those stare up and stare down looks, which literally said, man, boy, if you don't get from in front of you. I felt like my whole world was ruined. I didn't know what to do. I thought I was the only man that had ever been rejected. And let me tell you what happened. I had a really good friend, Kevin, who was very popular with the ladies. And he was at the nightclub with me. And I went to him, I pulled him aside. I said, Kevin, tell me something. Has any girl ever rejected you? And he burst out laughing. He said, man, that happens all the time. He said, but when that happens, I just move to the next girl and ask her to dance. You don't know what that did for me that day. That saved my life because I thought that I was the only person at 17. I was the only man who had been rejected. You see, we need as men to be able to talk and share our struggles so that we realize that we're not the only one in the world. That's a heavy burden to carry around to think that for some strange reason that you're the only person to have ever been rejected. And so this is something, the isolation sometimes, the loneliness worsens stress, worsens anxiety, and it creates depression. Workaholism, okay? Success and self-worth become tied to professional achievement. Many of us, our professional identities is based on how successful we are at work, and our self-worth is tied to how successful we are at work. I want you to try this exercise at some point. Whenever you go into a group and you're meeting people for the first time, um, within the first three questions that a new person asks you, they say, what do you do? Okay? What do you do? because what you do carries a lot of weight. And based on what you say you do, people will decide whether or not they will continue to have a conversation with you. So for us men, it's our success and our self-worth becomes tied to what it is that we have achieved. For this reason, many of us are unable to switch off. So we keep working because we want to achieve. And achieving is tied to our self-worth. There was a period when I lost the job and I was home for almost a year. And by golly, that did a lot to me, because I felt like less than a man. I felt like I wasn't doing my job. How is it that I could sit home every day and my wife is out there working? Okay. What will the children think about me? What are other people thinking about me? And so when I got back into the workforce, there was this I was unable to switch off. And sometimes we work as men, we work hard, and we could neglect personal relationships. Okay. And when we're not at work, we become very irritable. And that is why COVID had such a big effect on many of us, because when we were told that we had to work from home, when we were told that some places were closing down, the fact was that that did a lot to who we were professionally and to our identities. You see, in the corporate world, working hard is often celebrated in the corporate culture. But guess what? A lot of times, we're not perfect. We are anxious. We are unsure. We are uncertain. But we keep pushing, 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 pushing because we want to achieve a certain level of success and respect in the workplace. There's some cultures that are just tied to, like I said earlier, competitive or achievement oriented. During that same period of time when I was out of the job, I interviewed for another job, and they said I was one of the two finalists. And so when I had an interview with the panel, they asked the question, Richard, is there something else that you would like to ask? And I said to them, tell me a little bit more about your work hours. And they said, well, most of our executives don't leave here until 8 o'clock at night. And I was like, 8 o'clock at night from 8 o'clock in the morning? And they said, yeah. In fact, they said, if you expect to be successful, you've got to learn how to pull 12 and 13-hour shifts. Well, I realized that that wasn't the work for me because my children were young at the time. They were engaged in all sorts of extracurricular activities. And I had to make a choice. I thought at that point my kids and my family life were more important than working 12, 13 hours a day. But some men make the decision that guess what? I've got to put the 12 and 13 hours. And then it takes me back to working in substance abuse. Many times we had young addicts, and they would sit in front of their fathers and they would say, the only thing, Daddy, I wanted you to do was to spend time with me, to tell me that you love me. But you found more time and you found you gave more love to your work. And I remember those days from the 1980s, and I always said that when I became a father, I would not put my children through such things. And then there's the imposter syndrome, the pressure to always appear competent, especially in competitive or high stakes environments. Men, come on, we're not always going to be perfect. We're not always going to get it right, you see? But the fact is that some of us have to live this mask. We have to go overboard because we want to be seen a certain way. And so there's a fear of being found out. And so we want to be overprepared. We're dealing with chronic self-doubt, the fact that we doubt our capabilities. So we have to push, 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 and keep going because we want to make people think that we're even better than we really are. And so we live a lie. Okay, some of us are going through some hard times, but the fact is that we make it appear as if everything is okay, that we've got this thing down pat, but it's all done to protect ourselves. And then anger and frustration management. Man, we suppress our emotions. Okay, we suppress stress. Okay, and there are very few outlets for our psychological issues. So let me tell you how I get a lot of my clients. I work with a primary care physician. Most of my referrals come from the primary care physicians. You see, as I was saying earlier about stress, stress takes place in the body. So when we start to think in terms of what are some of the issues that take man to doctors. Of course, you have constant headaches. You have high blood pressure. You have heart palpitations. You have gastrointestinal issues. You have erectile dysfunction issues. You have backaches. You just have these ailments that just don't seem to go away. And so you go to a primary care physician because you're concerned. And what happens is that the doctor does an assessment and realizes that really there's really no issue. There's no physiological issue as to why these things are happening. And then he sends us in psychology a referral, and he says, I need you to see this young person or this elderly person. And that person comes in. And then through counseling, we begin to explore what's happening. And we see the correlation between mental health and physical health. The fact that a lot of the physical issues have a mental health beginning. And so to deal with the physical issues, we have to begin to address the mental health issues. This is why so many men are prone to outbursts, are prone to passive aggressive behavior, are prone to micromanagement, are prone to interpersonal conflict, because we suppress basically what it is that we're experiencing. But when you suppress what you're experiencing, it has to come out another way. And so it comes out sometimes as outbursts. You walk home, you're so frustrated, you're so angry, and the dog runs in front of you and you kick the dog. You walk in and the kitchen, the dishes in the kitchen, and so you start rowing the kids because you're asking, you've been home the whole day, why aren't the dishes washed? And so you're looking for outlets. The wife says something to you and you snap at her. And all of these things are because you're angry, you're frustrated, but the fact is that you don't know how to express your emotions. And then relationship and family strain. The imbalance between work and home life. Okay. We're emotionally unavailable. And then sometimes we're feeling guilty about the time that we spend away. This results in marital tension. We don't want to go home because, if this wife's going to nag me or the children's going to say this or whatever. And so then you begin to emotionally distance yourself from the people who are important to you. And then this last one, suicidal ideation in severe cases. When chronic stress, depression, or perceived failure, okay, becomes overwhelming and unsupported, then this results in withdrawal, hopelessness, or giving away personal belongings. Okay, so let's stop there for a second. Um, Young men who spoke in a focus group recently about suicide talked about withdrawal. Okay, they talk about the world being overwhelming, um, not being able to find any help, but the key is hopelessness. And they say when you get to the point where you feel totally hopeless, then that's when suicidal ideations begin to take place. And I was at a loss for a couple of minutes because I've never been at that point. I've always in my life been able to come up with a solution. So now I'm beginning to understand why someone would take their life, why someone would put a noose around their neck and jump off of a chair. Okay. And the reason for it is that they've lost all hope. They've looked everywhere, 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 and they see no solution. They see no hope. That's an issue. And the statistics show that men die by suicide at higher rates. And it's partly due to the stigma around help seeking. We don't want to talk about what is it that we're going through. We keep it all to ourselves. And then at the end of the day, when we realize that there's no hope, then suicide becomes inevitable. So an emergent issue is this quiet desperation. Many men appear successful on the outside, performing well, showing composure, but internally experience emptiness, fatigue, and disconnection. This silent suffering often goes unnoticed in corporate environments. There are many men who walk around in suits every day, well dressed, smiling. Hi, how you doing? They look like the picture of health, but on the inside, they feel empty, they're tired, and they have no connection. So why does this stigma exist? Well, it has a lot to do with cultural conditioning and masculine norms. From boyhood, many men are taught to be strong, in control, and tough it out. Men don't cry, boys don't cry. I could remember as a young boy falling down, and my father saying to me, "Get up. Why are you crying? Don't be a sissy. Little boys don't cry." Amazing. Okay. And these things resonate with you and they stay with you. Men are taught to be problem solvers, not problem havers. So, as men, we're not supposed to be having problems. We're supposed to be solving problems. And then a lot of us don't want to confess, especially on the job, that we're having problems because it's like, what are these other men going to think about me? Okay. If I go up to my friend and say, look, I am really having problems with my girlfriend or with my wife, then what are they going to think about me? They're going to think that I'm weak. They're going to think that, gee, hey, what's wrong with Richard? Okay. And then emotionally restrained. Men are not supposed to express the soft emotions. Okay. Anger is acceptable. Yeah, if someone gets you angry, you're supposed to defend yourself. You're supposed to get into a rage. You're supposed to slap them down. But sadness or fear, okay, or even gentle love. And it's really amazing. If we look at the generations, I knew my father loved me, but I can't tell you that I've ever heard my father say to me that he loved me. And I took this on even as a psychologist, and I told my girls how much I love them. And then one day when my son was going off to college, he said, Daddy, I love you. And I found it so difficult to say, son, I love you as well. And he kids me. He says, come on, Daddy, you can say it. You can say it. Just say it. Daddy, I love Caden, I love you. And every time he calls me, he ends the call with, Daddy, I love you. And then he says, Daddy, what are you going to say? And he has worked with me, over the years. So now it's very, very comfortable for me to be able to say it. But how many of us men are that comfortable saying it to our boys? Our boys need to hear it. I think this is one of the challenges that young men have in society today, that they don't hear often enough from their fathers saying that, son, I love you, I'm proud of you. So seeking help feels like a failure rather than strength for men. If you refer a man for counseling, often he has a big problem with it because he sees himself as a failure. Why is it that they think I need help? Why the stigma exists again? The fear of judgment. Men often fear being labeled as weak, being labeled as unstable or unfit for leadership. And this is especially in the corporate world. Oh man, you don't let them know that you have issues. You don't let them know that you can't deal with this. You don't let them know that you need a mental health day. Okay? Because now that affects your career path in an organization. You are unable to handle pressure. And so, if you are unfit for leadership, if you are unable to handle pressure, wow, I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to give them anything to deny me advancement. So, in corporate settings, these perceptions can threaten professional identity and career advancement. Lack of emotional vocabulary. Many men haven't been encouraged to name or process emotions beyond I'm fine, I'm angry, or I'm tired. You see, again, emotional vocabulary is something that women seem to be able to deal with. Like when a woman says, we have to talk, most of us men become a little anxious then, oh my goodness, they either say, I'm fine, or I'm angry, or I'm tired. Okay. But women seem to be able to tap into their emotional vocabulary so much easier. So without words for what they feel, men are unable to articulate or even ask for help. And then the limited visible role models. Few male leaders openly discuss therapy, anxiety, or depression. We don't hear about it. Okay? And silence therefore reinforces the myth that real men don't struggle. Mistrust of psychological services. Some men worry counseling will focus on emotion over action, or that it won't respect their need for privacy or practicality. Men want solutions, they don't want sympathy. So they don't want to go into the little mushy emotional talk. Okay? It's like, tell me what's wrong, tell me what I need to do to fix it. Okay? And I'll get it done. So I know I'm talking to a diverse audience, but I just want to share with you something from what I've garnered over 40 something years in the Bahamian society. Uh, and I'm sure it's like that in a lot of Caribbean countries. In the Bahamian society, mental illness has often been viewed through the lens of shame and weakness. We don't talk about it, we don't share it, you don't take your problems out of the home, you certainly don't go run into some psychologist for help. Traditional beliefs sometimes associate mental health struggles with personal failure or lack of faith. In a lot of Christian countries, it's again like Caribbean and West Indian islands, we depend heavily on faith, and so we tend to suppress our issues. We say we're going to pray about it, we're going to let God deal with it. At that, we're going to go to church. We're going to work it out. God will work it out for us. And this stigma is particularly pronounced among young African Caribbean men. We just don't deal with stuff. Another big thing from a cultural perspective is the myths that mental health disorders are caused by obeah or demon possession. Again, in our communities, many families refuse to think of mental health issues as being normal. So here in the Bahamas, we sometimes say they fixed him, meaning that there was some obeah or some demon possession that contributes to the way that someone is acting. And a recent survey, according to Dr. Earl Wright in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, discovered that some 81% of persons still hold fast to this myth. I have had people tell me stuff like, like John was doing well until he went to this island, and they didn't particularly like him, and so they fixed him, which meant that they worked some obeah or on him, and that is the reason why he behaves the way that he does. And see, it's safer for us to say that someone did something to an individual than to say that that person has a mental health issue. So there are three big things that I think that as men we got to begin to look at: our worrying, our stress, and our anxiety levels. Okay. Stress. Stress is brought on by stressors. Let's identify what are the stressors that we're experiencing. These are the things that produce stress. Is it the workload? Is it illness that you're experiencing? Is it negative feedback, conflict, uncertainty, deadlines, family member issues, money worries? These stresses produce stress. Interesting enough, if you can reduce the stressor, remove the stressor, your stress levels automatically drop. So we have to have some heart-to-heart talks. Sometimes the work environment is too much. Now you could either sit there and take it and let it beat you, and as we say, if you like it, let it kill you. Or sometimes you have to make a decision that, look, this job is a little too stressful for me. I need to begin search for something else. And I know people will say, well, you just can't walk off a job. No, you can't walk off a job, especially if you got responsibilities. But when you find that a job has become so overwhelming for you, you have to start preparing yourself for other things. Let me repeat that. When you find a situation that's overwhelming for you, you have to start figuring out how you're going to move on, move away from it. Depression, anxiety. Okay. So I got some little solutions for you. Three things to help you with your worries. Okay. Now remember, worrying is mental. Worrying takes place in the mind. Worrying is negative. We sit around and we think about everything that could possibly go wrong. When we begin to worry, we get up, and it's constantly on our minds. Worrying is the only experience I know where you can go to sleep 10 o'clock at night. You wake up, you think you've slept the whole night, and when you look at the clock, it's 11:45, and then you've got the rest of the night to stay up and worry. Interestingly enough, the same part of the brain that allows us to worry is the same part of the brain that allows us to be creative. What this means is that, yes, you're going to worry, but once you start worrying, you also have control over coming up with solutions. You see, because it's the same part of the brain that allows you to worry, it's the same part of the brain that allows you to be creative. But there are going to be some people who like to worry. And so I say, I can't convince them not to worry. So I say to everyone, if you like worrying, give yourself a worry budget. And this is an amount of time in which you allow yourself to worry. So every morning you get up, you say, I'm going to worry for 20 minutes. Then I want you to consciously redirect your thoughts. Okay? So you get your little bit of worrying in. You think about the worst. You think about everything that's going to go wrong. And then I want you to consciously redirect your thoughts. Secondly, when you notice that you're worried about something, you have to push yourself to come up with a next step or to take action. Okay? And then thirdly, write your worries down. Research has shown that just 8 to 10 minutes of writing can help calm obsessive thoughts. And that's critical because, if you go back a couple of generations, just about everyone carried journals, diaries. And that's because they wrote things down. They poured out their hearts, whatever issues they were dealing with, they put on paper. For us who know the book of Psalms and the Bible, we know that David wrote. Thousands of years later, they provide comfort to us. Yea, do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death? These famous things that we quote today all came from worries and concerns. And so we know that there's something soothing about being able to write things down as they affect us. So how do we break the stigma? I'm mindful of our time. How do we break the stigma? Well, leadership modeling. When male leaders share personal experiences with stress, therapy, or mental fatigue, it normalizes vulnerability as a leadership strength. It signals that emotional health and competence coexist. So, men, we've got to start sharing. We've got to start modeling. We've got to let people know that there's nothing wrong. Okay. I have a quick example. I was on a bus going from Taxco to Acapulco in Mexico. And on the bus, there's this big Greyhound bus. And one lady got up and walked to the back of the room, went into the bathroom, came back to the door and shouted out, said, "Anybody has any toilet paper here?" And another lady said, "Hey, ma'am, I've got a roll here." And so she walked up and she got the roll and she went back. All of my colleagues from the Bahamas looked at me and said, I would have kept that in until I got to Acapulco. There was no way that I was going to shout on a bus that I needed to go to the bathroom. You see, we've got to now start, man, we've got to use that approach. The thing is that we got to let our young boys and men who look up to us know that guess what? There are going to be times when we don't feel strong. There are going to be times when we're stressed. There are going to be times when we need to talk to people. And it's not a sign of weakness, it's actually a sign of strength. Secondly, we have to begin reframing help seeking as strength. Strong men manage their health, physical and mental. The same way that folks work out physically, you have to work out mentally. You'd see a mechanic if your car was making a strange noise. Your mind deserves the same maintenance. When you begin to think in a unusual way, it means that you've got to get it checked out. You can't continue to operate subpar. So the thing is that physical health is just as important as mental health. Mental health is just as important as physical health. Our theme for the Bahamas Psychological Association for the past couple of years has been mental health is health too. So you have to see them together. We've got a lot of young men who work out daily, they're lifting weights. But the fact is, if you're not mentally strong as well, then you're not good. You see, so we have to begin to see the two as going together hand in hand. And we've got to work as we work out physically, we've got to work out mentally. We have to create male-friendly access points, peer networks, or men's discussion groups where we could talk confidentially. Supportive is a practical tone. So, quick joke for you. I go to the barber every Sunday morning, and I started these barbershop talks with a couple of my friends. Um, we started it last year. And guess what? It's grown. People now come out at 6 o'clock in the morning just to sit and have these discussions. And the fact is that it's because it's the only opportunity that many of us as men get to talk about issues. And we talk about some really, really juicy issues. We talk about some of the problems we're experiencing at home and how we're dealing with this and how we're dealing with that. And we talk about some dealing with children and we talk about dealing with work. And the fact is that it's so popular now. So at one point, I used to get there for 6 o'clock in the morning. Now I set my alarm clock for 4 o'clock in the morning, and my wife is asking, "What is it that gets you out there?" And I say, "They expect me to come because they expect me to lead this discussion group." Lots of men of all ages who are interested in talking. And then I said to her, "Now I understand why you spend so much hours in the hairdresser store because it's the same thing that happens. Women go for they have their hair done and they could spend hours because they talk, and they get things off of their chest. And we have to begin to create male-friendly access points where men feel comfortable talking. We have to begin to integrate mental health into the corporate culture. We have to include mental health topics in leadership training and wellness. We have to make mental fitness part of performance excellence. And we have to normalize mental health days, just like sick days. You see, too long have we had just emphasis on physical health. I have the flu. I have a stomach injury. I have, the fact is that there are going to be some days when you get up and mentally you just don't feel like it. And the fact is that you shouldn't have to be afraid to say that, look here, I'm just not okay today mentally. Education and awareness campaigns. We have to help young men to understand the early signs of burnout and depression, how to manage stress and anger constructively. Real men stories of recovery and resilience. We have to share these things. Storytelling from peers, okay, has stronger impacts than statistics. You see, so when you get information from another man, like my friend Kevin, that's even more important, and that has a stronger impact than reading about it or hearing the statistics. The bottom line is breaking the stigma starts when we begin to redefine strength as self awareness and responsibility. That's what strength is. That's what's being a real man. When we understand and we know ourselves, when we understand what makes us tick, and then taking responsibility for it. Breaking stigma starts when we who are in leadership begin to model openness from the top down. And then breaking stigma starts when we begin to design spaces where men can speak safely in their own language. And again, it goes back to the barbershop. So, where are some of the places that men meet regularly? And what are some of the conversations that they need to have? So you're not alone in it. And here's the final group that I'm going to talk about today. Here's just some things that I want you men to start doing in the workplace to help yourselves begin to cope and deal with issues. 5 minutes of exercise every day beats 1 hour once a week. Okay, so let's not just exercise on Saturdays because between Sunday and Friday, so many things could accumulate. But if you can make 5 minutes of exercise every day, that beats 1 hour once a week. Listen to calming podcast or mindful playlist during your daily commute. Sometimes driving, if you've got an hour drive or a half an hour drive, put on something soothing, put on something that calms you. Use the time between home and work to really, really take care of yourself and calm you. At lunchtime, step outside, stretch, and notice your surroundings. Walk around for a few minutes. I want you to start writing down 3 things that went well every day. This is gratitude. What went well for me? What worked for me? Okay, this may have gone wrong, but guess what? What went right? Ask yourself what's been most stressful today. Okay? Don't run away from your stresses. Don't run away from your failures. Look at it as how am I going to overcome them? What is it that I need to do? I was just sharing with someone the story of the three little pigs. Some of you may remember that from primary school. And the third little pig always strategized and knew how to outsmart the wolf. Okay? And that's what we got to start looking at in life. We're in a stressful environment, but how do we strategize? How do we build? How do we become resilient? How do we bounce back? Okay? Also ask, what's one thing I'm grateful for? Prince will share with you some of the apps, okay, for mindfulness. And I'm going to stress again the journaling, okay? Write things down, write things down. Get it out of your system. Make movement non-negotiable. Okay, just keep moving, moving, moving. Exercise is critical. I notice that on days when I don't walk, that I'm not as strong as the days that I do walk. And so I try to make it a point to get up and get around and get moving because there's something about walking that allows the mind to be able to strategize and to develop. Think of your mind as a muscle. Consistency builds resilience. So if you're constantly pushing your mind, if you're constantly stretching, if you're constantly exercising, then you're going to be able to build, to rebuild. And resilience has to do with the ability to bounce back. If you think in terms of the word resilient, it comes from an old Greek word, the same word that we use for somersault, which means when we somersault, we're talking about landing on our feet. So we're going to be spun over in air from time to time, but when we're resilient, we land on our feet. Check in with one friend or coworker each day. And this is depression, you see. This is to work with depression. Ask people how are they doing, and listen to what is it that they're saying and how they're saying. When someone is alone and you see them walking to one end of the office to sit down, sometimes you have to approach them just to find out how they are doing. Okay. I hate the idea of when I look in the obituary and I see someone and then I say to my wife, oh, my mind was on Charlie last week. I was supposed to give him a call. Let me tell you, when your mind is on Charlie, give Charlie a call. Okay. And then share real, not surface conversations. Begin to help people to understand what is it that you're experiencing. Don't be afraid that people are going to laugh at you. Talk to people about what is it that's going on with you. And then join a group, a community, or faith circle that encourages mutual support. Once a week, take 5 to 10 minutes to reflect on your week. Reflection turns effort into learning and learning into habit. Okay? And then no mental health plan works without rest. Guys, you got to learn to rest. You got to learn to rest. Know when to say no and when to unplug. That's so important. You're not a superman. You have to take time out to rest. Okay? When men talk openly about mental health, it gives others permission to do the same. So, how do we pass this on to the next generation? Our sons need to see us dealing with our mental health. And when they see us dealing with their mental health, then they do the same. So, guys, in closing, I want you to be the friend, be the brother, be the father, or the colleague who normalizes getting help and showing care. Okay? Prince, that's me. I think I got through in record breaking time, or did I put everyone to sleep?
No, please, we were just meditating on what was said. It was very, very thought-provoking.
Okay.
All right, so I'll give everyone just about 2 minutes to propose any questions they have for Mr. Adderley. You can drop your questions in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, I can allow you to ask your question. All right, Kananaya has a question. Go ahead, Kananaya.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Adley, would you say that sometimes we expect men to communicate like as women and sometimes miss out on the cues of when they're actually communicating, when they're sad or whatever? Because, like you said, women are more um outspoken, or we sometimes say what's on our mind. And then us as like girlfriends or wives, we'll be like, if our man come inside the house from a long day of work and he doesn't say anything, we'll be like, so why you ain't opening up? And it's just like you adding unnecessary pressure because maybe he just needs to decompress. And then, so sometimes we as women, or let me speak for myself. Sometimes like I expect probably a man to act like me and to open up, and it's just like, no, let me sit back, watch his body language, watch his cues, and then because body language and other things is part of communication, not just being verbal. So I feel as though men do communicate. It's just we expect them to communicate in the way that we want them to communicate, therefore we don't pick up on certain cues, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we're both good communicators. It's just that we communicate different subject matters differently. Okay? When men want sex, they know how to communicate it. They know how to ask for it. They know how to show all the signs for it. Okay? And so, but the thing is that we have to, when it comes to mental health, because we've been so stigmatized, we don't know how to show weakness. Okay? We don't know how to express hurt. We don't know how to express pain. We don't know how to grieve. We don't know how to express loss. And so, so definitely in couples counseling and marital counseling, one of the key things that I go for is communication. I'll give you a quick joke. I like to walk at 4 o'clock in the morning, and my wife often wants to come with me. And I say to her, no. And she says, why? I say, because I need to be by myself. And she says, so why can't I come? I said, because you're going to talk, 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 talk. I said, and 4 o'clock in the morning is good for me because I can walk for a whole hour and I can talk and I can be reflective, you see? But as soon as we leave the house, the first question, she starts off yapping, yapping, yapping. And then if I'm quiet, she says, so why don't you talk? Why can't you talk? And so the deal is now I go from 4 to 5 by myself. I come back and I get her at 5 o'clock, and then we go for 45 minutes, and she could have all the talking that she needs. But the fact is that I need to deal with some stuff first on my own. Okay? Now, I do feel very comfortable talking about some issues with my male friends. Okay? Simply because we're males, we go through the same thing, we have the same issues. So for me, I had to break that sort of window to feel, first of all, comfortable with talking with other males, feeling vulnerable. But once I realized that, guess what? I'm not alone in the situation, that a lot of other men experience the same issues. Then that's what I call a support group. You see? And so sometimes as men, we're unable to talk to women about some issues. And we need to talk to other men about those issues the same way, like I said, that women talk with women about issues.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Adderley. And we have a question in the chat here. Someone is asking for you to run through some of the specific signs of depression for men.
Okay. Well, if we men display depression slightly different. So one of the things that we do, we become very irritable. Okay, and so the fact is that we get angry because you keep asking us stuff. You keep nagging us about different things. You want to talk. Okay? Because a lot of times, as women, we want to talk. Now, come on, talk to me, Ramon. Talk to me. What's happening? Talk to me. Okay? And the fact is that you're depressed. You don't want to talk. Okay? And then sometimes our depression comes about as anger. Okay? So we get very, very angry. You ask us the wrong thing and we let off on you. Okay? And so, whereas with women, sometimes they go quiet and they become reserved. Okay? the thing is that you, when under depression, you realize that and then men are irritable. They tend to withdraw. They want to be by themselves. You see, they go in the room, they lay down. They just want to be by themselves. They get angry, okay? And a lot of times they start to consume alcohol. Okay?
Yes, definitely, definitely. Thank you for that, Dr. Adderley. And we have someone asking how they can get into contact with you for a session.
Okay, I am gonna send Prince a copy of my a card. I do work at a family medicine on Blake Road, but that's just on weekends. I'm at the University of the Bahamas, so you can reach out to me in the psychology department here, and we could coordinate as well.
Fantastic. Okay, we're going to end there. Thank you everyone for your questions. I want to draw your attention to our screen. We do have our points voucher code displayed on screen right now. So you are definitely going to be rewarded for your attendance. Thank you so much for engaging with us over this entire series. We really are very happy about being able to afford this to you guys. And this is certainly something we are hoping to do some more of in the future. But special thanks to Dr. Adderley, and thank you to all of you for sharing in this journey with us. I also would like to draw your attention, of course, to our wonderful resource in our Personify Health app, the one called Headspace. Dr. Adderley would have talked about, in your commute time, maybe listening to guided meditations and doing things that are calming and that help you to de-stress. And Headspace certainly has many options for things of that nature. So please look into that, and we will certainly try our best to get Dr. Adderley's information out to those of you who are interested in perhaps booking a session with him. So thank you all once again, and please go on to have a very lovely Monday afternoon and a wonderful rest of your week.
Okay. Bye bye, everyone.